Hey, welcome, enjoying your blended family. All the B.Fams out there, what is happening?
Yes, I'm so excited because I have my dear husband on this episode today. As many of y'all, if you've been following along, we've been doing a little book club.
Book clubs.
A book club, yes.
Normally you do them in the summertime, but it was like, no, that's not how we're going to do it. We're going to do it right before a major blended family conference.
Yes, it's actually like just perfect timing for us to just start digging into what Scott and Vanessa are talking about here in the book, Blended and Redeemed. And so we decided to invite you guys in on the process with us. So we're taking chunks, either a chapter or 2 chapters at a time. We are just reading what they say, and then we're doing just a little discussion on what that means to us, in the hopes that you are doing the exact same thing, and it's just bringing that peace and joy and comfort that your blended family needs right now.
So this week we are talking a marriage reflecting God. So big, amazing topic that whenever we get this right, we get our marriage right. And then the blend just happens so much easier. You know, if you want an easy button, you got to start with God. Mm-hmm. Easy button, start with God. And things just go a lot smoother. So we're going to be diving into that here in this episode, and we're excited. It's going to be some real good stuff. So y'all stay tuned. We'll be right back. Hey, welcome to Enjoying Your Blended Family. I'm Randall.
And I'm Scarlett.
This podcast is all about strengthening your blended family relationships
and having more fun,
giving you hope and encouragement so everyone is enjoying the journey together. New episodes come out every Monday and Friday. Mondays, we talk on a hot topic that are in blended families.
And Fun Fridays are all about ideas you can use to create more fun memories together in your family.
We truly believe the more fun you have together, the less problems you'll see.
So let's have some fun and enjoy this episode. All right, and so like Randall was saying, the easy button and starting with God, definitely.
Easy button.
Definitely.
I think we all need like an easy button. Maybe we should create a blended family easy button.
I bought us easy buttons.
But did it say blended family?
No, we need to put that on.
See, that's what I'm saying. We need a blended family easy button.
Someone with
a
the
B.Fam easy. Easy B.Fam.
Easy B.Fam. There we go. We need someone with a Cricut that can make us something to put on top of our buttons, because I did buy some buttons. But really, the easy button, or we ask for like a manual, instructions, and God does leave us his wisdom in his word, in the Bible. True. But sometimes if we are not skilled in the area of reading the Bible or interpreting it for ourselves, or maybe we have some false theology or just teaching in our minds, and we have just caused that, or we've taken that to be our own truth, and it's not actually what the Bible says. And so that's why it's amazing when people like BKF, Blended Kingdom Family, have come along and made a book where they're taking the Word of God and they're saying it in a way that understands. Just like when you go to the doctor and they give you the diagnosis and you're like, wait, what? And you're like, can you please just
speak it in normal people terms?
Yes, speak it in a way that I can understand it. And that's what Vanessa and Scott do in the book. And so it's using biblical principles, which is what we want as our number one resource. But it's having a secondary resource to help us understand. And they give us some very practical and now times. Yeah. Because a lot of stuff too in the Bible, it might not make sense to us because that happened thousands of years ago. And we have a very different culture that we live in today.
Well, and just taking everyone's experiences, right? And just like Scott and Vanessa do in this book, they're sharing their experiences and connecting it with what God has shown them through their journey. Same with us, you know. I mean, we sit here and we share with you what God has shown us through our journey, right? And that's what God has called us to do, is that we all work together. We all love each other and we all help each other. We're all our support system. Yeah. And you were never made to do this alone. And so I remember through our blended family challenges that we faced, we felt like we were alone. We didn't know how to navigate through it. We didn't know what we were doing. And we were just crying out to God so many times saying, what do we do? But now there are a lot more people speaking up. I think God's just really placed it on people's hearts to, hey, speak up because others need to hear this. Others need to connect with this. And so this is really an amazing topic because a marriage reflecting God, it all starts with your marriage. It all starts right here. And a lot of us were coming into a blended family with kids, and we think that it starts with our kids. It's like, no, we got to keep our kids safe and we got to keep them protected, which we do. We're not discrediting that by any means, but God never changes the structure, the order. It is relationship with God first, our marriage second, and then our kids. And I know that's challenging for a lot of people to hear that because they think, oh, well, this is different. It's a blended family and it looks a lot different, but it doesn't. Whenever we get this in that right order, when we say, well, it's almost challenging us that if we're going to remarry, we have a failed marriage and we remarry, then we better make sure that we're listening to God to make sure we're finding that right person. Because, if we're just jumping into another relationship and we haven't taken that time to heal ourselves, we're taking that brokenness into another marriage, then we've got it all out of whack right then, right? So it is that challenge that, we got to be looking to God this whole time for that right person because we need that family unit. And it looks a lot different with blended families, but we need that healthy marriage, and it all starts with our relationship with God in it.
Yeah, and we have been breaking some of that stuff down over the last, because we're in chapter 4 now, and chapter 3 went in really deep in prioritizing those 3, and we had Ginger and Heidi on, and we talked through some of that stuff, and it is, go back and listen to chapter 3 if you have not yet, because it really hones in and gives some very practical steps on how to prioritize and why it's important to prioritize God first, then your marriage, then your kids. And if you do it in a right way, nobody knows that they're second or third on the list, because when you are putting God first, He's giving you everything you need in order to prioritize your marriage. And when you're putting your marriage first, that's filling you up. It's like a trickle down effect, so that you're giving your kids everything that they need to have a successful blended family. And so when you do it in that order, God really is showing up and giving you your entire family what they need. And as I've been studying through the Bible here lately, one thing I've seen is almost every single family in the Bible is a blended family in some sort. From the very beginning, when families are being created after the fall, like, you begin to see there are multiple wives. They're, because they have infertility issues, they're inviting other people into the family, not necessarily God's design for them. But even though they do that, and even though they're in this really interesting dynamic with a blended family, God doesn't ever turn His back on them. He is there faithful. As long as they are staying connected with Him, He is continually pouring out His blessings, and whatever His promise was for that person, He sees it through from beginning to end. So it's really incredible to see how every family there, He doesn't just say like, oh, well, y'all messed this one up, so I'm going to dip. Like, I can't have my hand in this. Mm-hmm. No, He just wants you to stay connected with Him. So we're going to share some ways today that just to kind of check yourself. And I'm going to go through the very beginning.
Don't wreck yourself.
I was waiting for a song
check
to bust
yourself.
out.
Don't wreck yourself. Is that even a song?
Yeah.
Oh, see there.
You got to check yourself before you rickety wreck yourself.
Rickety wreck yourself.
How about that? Oh man.
I didn't grow up in the rap world.
Okay, that was just me.
Or in the R&B. Yeah. That I didn't. Yeah. Just a little bit. I know the highlights.
You dabbled in it.
I dabbled in it enough that it was a seed planted deep in my head that it just came out. Which that's a whole nother message within itself, right?
Yes.
Wow.
Okay.
But yeah, no, I love this because in this book, chapter 4, Marriage Reflecting God, they share 6
steps for a marriage reflecting God.
And these are really great steps. And, I loved how you said it before we dive into this. I love how you said it that whenever we put things, when we get our priorities right and our family, in our marriage, in our relationships, that no one even knows the difference. It just all connects easier. And really all that is, are we connecting with God? Are we spending time with God? Are we making our marriage in priority? Are we making sure we're spending time together and communicating well and trying to work on, being the best married couple we can be? And then just the relationships with our kids come natural with that, and it all of our relationships start connecting so much easier whenever we're putting that intentionality and focus on our relationship with God and in our marriage. Then it just flows. Good stuff.
Yeah, we even had our 24-year-old yesterday and she listened to part of chapter 3 because I was listening to it walking around the house while I was getting ready for the podcast last week. So, and I told her, I was like, listen to this like little segment in there. And so she has some of this, getting into her head as well. She's surrounded by it. But we had planned a date night and we were going out and we're trying to explain, like why we were leaving the house or whatever. And she's like, no, by all means go. I don't want another divorce on our hands. And, she was silly and be joking, but that is the truth. Like when you are putting these other two things before your kids, you are actually putting your kid first. And I think we say this a lot on here. You're putting them first, because you are setting your family up for success when God is your number one priority, and then you're prioritizing your marriage because you don't want another divorce on your hands. God wants this to be your last marriage. So using some of these principles to really feed into that. And I thought it would be a little fun, not really because y'all need to know the ins and outs of Randall and I's relationship, but if we ranked these things how we felt we were doing. And the purpose I wanted us to do that as I was reading and listening to this chapter is because I feel like we're somewhat professionals in this area,
Yeah.
For one, our 15 years of experience.
15 years.
For two, we are conscious of this. We are diving into it. Unlike in the beginning, and like Scott says in the book, how many resources did he find when he needed help in his blended family? And he said 0. And he said, well, how many did I go looking for? And he said 0, because he didn't know. You don't know what you don't know. And so we're at a point in our relationship, our marriage, we know we need help. We know we need to dig in and look for that. And yet some of these areas we still struggle in. Some we have done incredible at. And
high fives.
High five over here. And, well. And some, it's still 15 years in, and having grown kids, we still struggle in these areas. And
reverse high fives. Reverse.
Okay.
Reverse.
And so I just wanted to show you that it's okay that it's not perfect, and that you feel like, because sometimes we can beat ourselves up. We've been working at this and it's still a struggle. Maybe this isn't the person for me. Maybe I need to try again. No, this is your person. It just takes work, and it takes really diving in and seeking God in order for him to give you what you need. So
what's funny is whenever, people that have that mentality, that they think that the next marriage is going to be rainbows and butterflies, and then they realize, no, this takes work too.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes 5 marriages in, you're like, am I the problem?
I've seen people, it's like, wait a minute, everybody's just terrible. I don't understand. And
and they can either become very bitter in that area and jaded towards marriage, or realize maybe it's me.
But it's good work. So,
yes.
All right, diving in.
Okay. So step one.
Step 1.
Pray together every day. And I wanted us to rank just to see how men and women have different mindsets. We haven't talked about this. Where would you rank us on a scale 1 to 10?
Because we go on the fly on these things.
This was my plan, and I was just going to throw it at you so you couldn't have time to think about it.
That I go on your fly.
Hey, yesterday I was recording a video and my fly was actually down. I was like, that's the worst nightmare right there. Luckily, it was just a practice.
No, it's like in the hall of school with only your underwear. That's the worst nightmare.
That would be the worst nightmare. Public speaking with teaching with my zipper down is one of mine.
That's one of your worst.
Yeah, so I always do this weird zipper check. If you see me ever walk on a stage, I'll grab my private area. Guys, I'm checking my zipper.
We're good.
Anyways, so.
And then if you see her spin around on the stage, you know what she's doing. She's zipping it up.
I'll probably untuck my shirt or so. I've done that move. Because sometimes it's not, I am a little ADD, so sometimes there's just a lot of steps after you go to the bathroom, and then I wash hands, and then, it's just a lot of different things you have to do, and sometimes zipping up is not priority. But then sometimes it's because I have pants that unzip.
But you know what is priority? Praying in your marriage.
Praying in your marriage. Thanks for bringing it back. So where would you rank us? 1 being lowest, 10 being highest. Where would you rank us on praying together every day? And you and your spouse can do this as well.
All right. So yeah, definitely get you a pen and paper, and you rank your marriage while we're ranking our marriage, because we have not discussed this. I never give 10s just because there's always room for improvement. But I think praying in our marriage, I would probably give us a 6.
Okay.
A 6.
Yeah, I was going to say a 7. Just because of the fact that we do.
7, the number of completion. So we're complete.
We're complete right there.
Done.
Except it's not, because we got to get to a 10.
That is true.
But in your mind, we would never will. So we're pretty equal in that, because we do pray together. And if you don't pray together, I mean, we didn't start from the beginning. It was in the middle of our hardest time in our step family that someone recommended we start praying together. And it was very awkward, very weird. We would go through seasons where we do amazing.
We would avoid it. Like, let me get out of the house really quick.
Let me grab my lunch and get out before he remembers we need to pray. But when we do, we would see like literal mountains, maybe not literal mountains, but what were mountains in our step family of just heartache and pain that we thought, will this ever change? They would come crumbling down, and we would see, I'm having Paula Abdul song in my head. Anyways, you're rubbing off on me. But these
15
things
years
would
later
begin to just shift in the spiritual realm, because we are asking God to help us instead of us just coming in complaining about it nonstop. God would come in and intervene, and we would get a text message from a kid or a phone call or a drop in or whatever when we had no contact with them. So prayer really did turn things around. And I would say that was probably about year 7 or 8 where we started praying together. And for our routine, most of the time, we got it to where during the week when one of us has to leave for the house, like leave work, leave to go to work, we are in a habit of praying together. And when our seasons shift, as I was teaching summer, I was off, and so I wasn't awake. Like, we would go through little dips where we wouldn't. But for the most part,
pretty consistent.
We're getting there. So
and just throwing this out there, I was, whenever I went to a pastor's kind of group one time, and I heard this phenomenal pastor to where, she was ministering to us and stuff. And whenever she had just came to terms on, and she said, listen, when I have spent my time with God, if I'm getting it 5 days out of the week, I'm calling that a good week. And we're like, we're thinking, dang, no, someone like you of your stature's got to be like 7 days diving in, hours out of the day, and whenever we heard that, is almost like a relief to us, like, okay, we're doing all right.
Yes. Yeah.
So, just being honest with you, 4 to 5 days out of the week for us praying together, that's about where we're at,
Yeah.
The weekends is kind of free for all,
yeah.
Because our schedules are not consistent then. But, whenever we find that our schedules are more consistent, then it is that habit in there that we've instilled. And so that's just kind of being transparent, 4 to 5 days out of the week, we're making sure that we're praying together. And then if we have anything coming up, if we hear prayer requests, or we got something going on, or we're worrying about our kids or something like that, it's like, we'll stop and we'll pray about that as well too. So
yeah, we're getting so much better at, instead of just venting and complaining to each other, like, okay, let's pray about it.
Yeah.
Let's invite the Lord to solve this problem for us.
We know the answer here, guys. Come on.
All right, so number 2.
Number 2. Did you miss that? Number 2. It's been a few weeks.
I was going to try to
it's been a few weeks.
Slide past that.
It's been a few weeks.
Be intentional in your communication.
You have to communicate? Is that important?
Where would you rank us? 1 to 10.
That's important in our marriage. Huh. Interesting.
That sounded a little bitter.
Communication in our marriage. We do good here. We really do. We've gotten so much better than if you would have asked me year 1, I would have said a solid 2. Now,
I think if I would have asked you 2 days ago, you would have given us a solid 2.
Nah, I kid. I'm a jokester. No, I think right now I would say 7.
Really?
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah. Yeah, probably about a 7. I think we do communicate really well. I think it's the day-to-day or maybe the weekly things we don't communicate as well with.
You mean like just
like we
housekeeping
don't,
stuff?
Yeah, or connecting with our schedules because we know that that's important. Sometimes we'll talk through it before the week happens, and then we're on the same page. But then a lot of times, I think that's what gets dropped more than anything. But I think for the most part, especially like I'm talking about some of the the emotional, deep communications. I don't think we hold as much of that in anymore as we used to.
Yeah.
I think we're very quick to talk about that and disclose that and kind of bring that to the table to where we can get through it so that we're not harboring any of that. So I think it is more of like the day-to-day things. Hey, I forgot to tell you, did you know I'm doing this Saturday? And it's like, wait, what? No, I didn't. Does that involve me? So, I think that's where we still have a lot of room for growth. But yeah, I think on some of the more emotional topics, I think we do a lot better with.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
What do you?
I think I would probably give it a 5.
Wow. 5.
Yeah.
Room
Well,
for growth.
just
we're 50%.
50%. I feel like.
So the average is 6. So
What do you mean?
I gave it a 7. You gave it a 5. So it's a
Okay.
6.
So we average in the middle
6.
there. Yeah, because I think if we weren't super intentional about it, I think it could be a lot lower.
Oh, yeah.
But because of our schedule and busyness and how important we know it is, that we always come back and we get back to that point of communicating. Like, we know how important. So it's like, okay, we need this time together. We need to be able to connect. We need to be able to open up and those type things. And if not, if we didn't prioritize it, I think we would be a 1 or a 2. But
yeah. So I challenge you that you're doing this with your relationships right now, that you're noting and what is yours on a 1 to 10 scale. That way, we look back at this and we say, okay, well, where do we have room for improvement? And you're taking resources like this book and reading these steps that they have in here, like being intentional in your communication. What does that look like? And using that to help be that resource and fuel in your marriage.
yeah, for sure. All of this you're taking. These are the 6 things you need to do. So figure out where you're at and where you want to go, and maybe wherever you're lowest, start there. So
before we move on, though, I do want to hammer that communication in a marriage is big. This is what normally breaks marriages apart, and especially in blended families, because we can carry so much weight into a new marriage. And if we don't talk about this with each other, if we don't work past this and we're keeping things to ourselves, and maybe your spouse is doing things that you just don't agree with or you don't like, and you're bottling that up. I always use the analogy of a Coke can. It's you're just shaking that Coke can. It's going to eventually explode. You're going to explode all over your spouse, and it's not going to be pretty. It's going to be a mess. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times that's how we communicate. We just bottle things up, hoping things get better. And then finally it eats at us too much. We explode on them, and that's how we communicate. We communicate the wrong ways, and it ends up creating more dividing lines, more anger, more frustration in our marriage, which wedge us apart. So when it's saying being intentional, really learning how God calls us to be intentional in communication in our marriage, this is big. This will keep you and your spouse together on the same page, growing closer. I know every emotional discussion we've had, once we finally brought it to the table saying, hey, this is bothering me, can we talk about this? And that has done nothing but brought us closer together.
Yeah. Every single time.
Yeah, every single time. And those are conversations that I think within each one of us we want to avoid, because no one likes conflict. And so we avoid until finally it, like I said, just becomes that explosion. But whenever we learn, and this is that intentionality, we learn, we read things, books, and we listen to podcasts like this, and we learn, okay, listen, I'm feeling this way. I need to talk to them. And then learning how to talk to them to where we're not attacking each other, to where we're able to present it in a humble way, saying, listen, when this situation happens, this is how I feel, and it really just bothers me. It really hurts. And, any thoughts on that, any way that, we could work past this? How do you feel in a situation like that? Whenever we're presenting it that way, man, game changer.
Ditto, ditto, ditto. Yes. And that was one thing that I was thinking of mentioning, is that just because you don't argue, or like sometimes we think like, oh, okay, well, at least we don't argue. But just because we're not arguing does not mean that you have healthy communication. You've got to get through the hard stuff. And sometimes that means disagreeing on some things. So you don't have to just agree with your spouse.
Yeah, no. And, there were so many good points in here, and so many good things, especially on this. Like, they have this headline. I just want to read this. How we speak to and treat our spouse is a direct reflection of how we see and feel about ourselves. Powerful right there, and that, it's, I always reflect back to God's words whenever, Jesus is asked, well, what's the greatest commandment? And he says, well, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, body, and soul. This is me paraphrasing. He said, then love others as you love yourself. If you don't know how to love yourself, then it's hard to love your spouse. And so this is where that personal relationship with God comes in, because whenever you understand how God feels about you, when you understand that he calls you righteous through Jesus Christ, there's power in that. It's not, it's a freedom that comes in you, that God sees you as perfect. He sees you as fearfully and wonderfully made. And whenever you see yourself like that, even though you've been from a divorce, because I think right now I just feel like people need to hear this, that when we get into a marriage, we've come from brokenness, and we can feel broken. And so we're really, beating ourselves up with that. But God wants to set you free. He wants to redeem you from that, because that's not who you are, and that's not how he sees you. And when you understand that, to your core, that how much God loves you, so much easier to love your spouse. And that's how we can communicate with each other then. So good stuff. So number three,
recognize marriage as a faithful commitment to your spouse and to God.
Yep. Recognize marriage. I'm going to say that again.
Say it again.
Recognize marriage as a faithful commitment to your spouse and to God. So this is, how do we rank this? So I would say we're pretty high on this one. I mean, I would say an 8.
10 out of 10.
You would say a 10 out of a 10?
I say 10 out of 10. 10 out of 10, okay. I mean, there's no doubt in my head, like, that, for one, that this is a commitment, that we're in it for the long haul.
Yeah, no doubt.
And that, as far as looking outside of our marriage, because in the book, I don't think we'll have time to get to all of it today, but they give some very practical guidelines to come together as a family or as a married couple in order to protect the unity that you have, the marriage that you have, the commitment that you have made to each other, so that you're not going outside of the marriage. And I don't think we've never really discussed it in a sense of like, we don't do this, but we really have, in my opinion, we have zero desire. Like, we're not best friends with the opposite sex. We're not putting ourselves in situations where we're surrounded by the opposite sex and getting tempted in that way. Or, I pick up your phone. These are things that Scott and Vanessa talk about as far as like putting like a unspoken rule or whatever, that I can pick up your phone anytime, or you could pick up mine, or I could get on your email. We have each other's passwords, not because we don't trust each other, but really just function wise, we need to be able to get into each other's different accounts and stuff. And I don't ever worry if you picked up my phone, you would see something that you shouldn't see, or if I pick up yours. And I know in the beginning of marriage, because I was hurt before, I would pick up your phone a lot, and I would look and check your messages just to make sure you were on the up and up. And
you got pretty bored, huh?
I know. I was like, this dude's boring in a good way, though.
It's like, dang, I found no juice here.
But in my previous marriage, towards the end especially, there was a lot of things that shouldn't have been happening in our marriage. And I was constantly trying to find security and checking his phone. And I was constantly being let down. And so I brought that insecurity into our marriage in the beginning. And you just showed me time and time again that I could trust you in that area and built that up. And so as far as it being a commitment to each other, I feel like we rank very high. And then as far as our commitment, in this for God, we really hone in on what he has in store for us as a married couple and what he wants us to do and follow. Almost sometimes where people think we're crazy, but follow what he has called us to do.
Agreed. Now, and it's I think for us, whenever we got together, our faith was just at a great point. We both come from hurt, and then we both took time to, took a little time to kind of reflect on time-ish.
You took more time than I took.
To reflect on what we wanted, and really not what we wanted, but what God wanted for us. So when we got married, we knew it was a God thing, and that God had brought us together. And so really it's not about the piece of paper for us. It's about that commitment to God and that honoring God for bringing us together. And so it's never really been, anything other than that. And, we put up boundaries, and it's not even that I wouldn't say we're very mindful or intentional. We just know that these are purposeful boundaries that we have to put up to protect our marriage. And so we do that just kind of fluidly there. It's not like we have to come to the table and talk about this and discuss it, which is not a bad idea, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't. By all means, I think you should. I think you should have those conversations, especially initially, as you're, young in your marriage, to talk on boundaries. What does that look like? Because I have heard other couples to where, they'll go out to dinner with ladies for work and things like that, some of the guys, and they don't see anything wrong with that. And it's like, no, that's not good. That's opening doors you shouldn't.
Have you not seen War Room?
Yeah, come on. Come on.
Now, I will admit, though, just to be in full disclosure, the enemy does put random crazy thoughts in my head, and I have to take those thoughts captive, and he will put things in my head and I will start spiraling down. So it's not that the thought of divorce, or if this fight or this emotion that comes up, or this crazy thought of, could he be cheating on me? Like, these thoughts do fill my brain sometime. And then I have to be like, that's from the enemy. That's not from God. And I have to shut that down. But then even being open, I've, become open with him and be like, look, this is what my brain is trying to do right now. And
I'm like, you've been watching way too many movies.
And a lot of it is what
shift.
I put in. Yeah.
I gotta shift what you're watching.
A lot of shows, they're showing a lot of infidelity, and then it'll make my brain start thinking stuff, and then
I'm like, here, look at my phone. And then she gets bored, and she's like, oh, okay, yeah, you're good.
You haven't ever done that. But it's because I know, and I even feel bad, if I start thinking random things, and then I tell them, it's like, and I don't want you to think I don't trust you. These are just the thoughts. And I've cut out television right now with a lot of that stuff going on, and it changes. What you put in is going to come out. So I just did want to put that out there, because if you're thinking these thoughts and you're like, well, man, they don't ever think those things. The thoughts do come in sometimes, and I have to replace that with what I know to be true.
Take them captive.
Take them captive.
Take them captive. That should be a shirt slogan. Take it captive. Yeah, never mind. So we got three more, and we will come back right after this, and we'll talk on those. So we'll see you in a second. When we first became a step family, just like you, we didn't quite know what we were getting into.
Scarlett and Randall Tandy here from Enjoying Your Blended Family, and we have been a blended family for over 15 years. And not only did we have to figure out how to handle the day-to-day struggles that come with being in a step family, about 7 years in, our biggest fear happened, and each of our kids went to go live with their other parent.
We went through seasons of zero connection with each one of our kids, and we had to get really creative on ways to reestablish and reconnect those relationships.
And through prayer and becoming very intentional, God restored our family in true God-like fashion and made it better than we could have ever imagined or hoped for.
So God has called us to help other families do the same thing, to make those connections. So if you're looking for stronger relationships, deeper connections, and more communication, then we believe it truly starts with being intentional and creating these fun opportunities in our family.
Click the link so that you can get quick access to the process that we use to help you find common interests in your family so that you can be more intentional on spending time with your kids, your spouse, and your family as a whole.
We believe you can take the step out of step family and create a blended family that you truly enjoy.
You can find our podcast on Enjoying Your Blended Family on YouTube or anywhere that you listen to podcasts. And while you're sitting there, go ahead and follow us on social media.
So when you have more fun, you'll see less problems. All right, number four, cuatro.
Number 4 of a marriage reflecting God. In order for a marriage reflecting God, you need to be able to forgive freely.
Ooh.
And you know what?
Ooh.
You know what?
What?
On this one, when I saw that one, I said 10 out of 10.
10 out of 10.
Forgive so freely. But then...
She's a liar.
Then I read Vanessa's question at the end of the book, and it says, what does... Well, let me see. Maybe make sure I'm reading the right one.
She just thought that she had this one down. She's like, a 10.
It says, 10. What does forgiveness look like in your marriage? Is it discussed or just an assumption after the heated waters settle? How can you be better at forgiving? And I thought about that because in my head, I was like, 10 out of 10. I forgive Randall. Like, he messes up and I just let it go, let it go. And I thought that is me forgiving freely. But because I want to avoid conflict, I don't even tell you some of the times when I get hurt by something and I hold it in. I mean, there have been times that I've held things in for years before I've said something. I've chose to forgive them and move on in my heart. Like, that's what I've decided. But we never even had a discussion, so he never even knew it was an issue. So I was like, ugh. So I'm willing to forgive, but I have not been great at communicating those areas that I have been hurt in.
Well, now's the time right here live on camera. I mean,
we want to dig into it. No, just clear, we've discussed this on here before, but one of the things that really stands out to me was when we made the decision, we wanted to have children. I really wanted a child with you. We are a blended family that never had kids together. We don't have an ours baby. And it kept, in Randall's head, when we have a bigger house, when we have a bigger car, when we get our life together, then we'll have another one. And by then our kids were all running off and we got, the bigger house, we got the bigger car, and he finally gave me the go ahead and said, yeah, we're going to do this. And maybe 2 weeks in, he said, never mind, I don't want another kid. And
because we started hitting some really struggles with our kids at that time.
It was hard, and I understood his reasoning. Our kids were all preteen teenagers, and it was a rough time in our life. And he really made that decision, and I decided as the wife, that I would submit to his decision there. But I held on to resentment, and really, for about 2 years after that, I withheld myself emotionally and physically, without even having real conversations with them till one day I came home. But that conversation that I did have with you when I came home after a day out with some friends, and one of my friends was just speaking what God was saying to her, and she was actually speaking it to my other friend that was sitting there, and I was the one receiving the word and realizing what God was saying, and I was upset. I wanted to have a child, and I thought from the beginning we would, and I told you from date number 2, I think, I want more kids. And because we kept waiting and waiting and waiting, time had passed. Then it came down to you saying no, and then I was upset about that, and I held on to it until we had that conversation. It didn't change. Unfortunately, my body had changed during that time, and I don't think that I could even have children anymore. But it was a decision that really you made, and I just followed through, and then I held on to the hurt from it. And so then when we got all of that out on the table, it really began to shift the intimacy that we had with each other. And like I said, it didn't solve the problem. He didn't say, okay, fine, let me give you a baby. But it did bring healing because we talked about it. Right. And that was a game changer in our relationship. I began to become more intentional on telling you the things that I was just holding in.
Sure. And, you know, and this one too, forgive freely. I was talking with our pastor at church. We're in a discipleship, and you know, just me and him were talking one day, and we were talking on forgiveness, and it's kind of like, do you really forgive freely? Do you really forgive everything? And you know, whenever we hear this, and this is a challenge to all of us, right? Whenever you hear this, we always go to the big. You know, we always go to big, like kind of that instance right there is a big issue, you know, but do we forgive freely in the small things? You know, whenever maybe there's something that the other spouse does that's just a little thing that annoys you or something like that, do you forgive them for that? You know, and there's so many of those things that we do throughout on a day-to-day with each other because we're constantly living with each other. Do we forgive each other for those things as well? Because as we know, little things build up and turn into big things. And so that was really a challenging conversation that we had, because it was like, man, even in our relationships, you know, when we're talking marriage, so we can look at the marriage relationship, each one of us will do just little annoying things on a day-to-day that can really just start building up. And do we really forgive that person for them, or do we hold that in?
Well, do you? Where do you rank us on the little...
On the little things?
On the little things.
I don't know. I'd probably, on the little things, I'd probably give us a lower ranking. I would say probably on maybe a 5 or 6.
He gets annoyed with me a lot. I do a lot of things that his personality cannot handle. Like, here's a little thing. He does not like that I have Hawaii like lays on my mirror in the car, and he takes them off every time. It frustrates him so bad, and I'm like putting him back up, like, but I like them. It gives my car some flair.
and that's only when I'm driving it and she's not in there, because like I'm sitting there pulling out and I'm like, I can't even see through the stupid thing, so I'm like taking it off and I'm throwing it on the chair.
I know, those are the little, and I do. My personality, I do those kind of things in all of our life, in our house and everything. And he walks around just annoyed by it. So that's a you thing.
You're like, I'm good on the small things.
I'm good. I let go that you get upset with me over it. I forgive you for not forgiving me.
A true testament to personalities and the differences.
You know,
we make each other better.
Yes,
we make each other better.
Yeah.
I love you, babe.
I love you too. I love you too. You need to work on that. From our lips to God's ears. Is that the saying? Yeah. Okay. So forgive freely. Where would you rank yourself?
Where would you rank us on the small stuff?
On the small stuff? On how I forgive you?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm a 10. That's where I'm a 10. I'm a 10 out of 10. I let
how about
it go.
How about on the big stuff?
On the big stuff, I already said. I would set a 10 until...
yeah, but you never gave us... You just said a 10, but then you thought about it once you heard that. So where would you...
On the big stuff, I think we're much better at it now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we really... and I don't... there may be big stuff that we're still holding in, and I don't know. But I do think I would prefer to just... I'll give us a 5. I prefer to just forgive you. A 5
on the big stuff?
On the big stuff. I prefer to forgive you and move on still than have hard conversations about it.
Oh, wow. We don't need to talk about it.
Yeah, well, I mean, because I guess I have enough peace with God that he's going to work it out. And so, and I do this with a lot of things, but maybe we do need to lay it out on the table, and maybe then I wouldn't frustrate you so bad.
You don't frustrate me.
I don't frustrate you in the big or the little?
No.
No, I mean, because God is good, and he is working it all out for good. And if it gets to the point of hurt enough, then I will bring it up eventually.
Yeah.
But like even in the book where Scott and Vanessa talk about not talking about hard stuff right before bedtime, or
that was good. I like that.
Not a good time of day. And I don't feel like we have those rough conversations right before we're trying to go to bed or something, or out the door. But again, I think that's because we choose not to have the conversations.
They come up when they need to come up.
But because we choose to forgive freely.
That's true.
So it's like this cycle. So as long as it's not damaging things, like whereas with the whole having another kid together, that resentment was causing me to hold back from you emotionally and physically. So that was a conversation that really needed to happen. And so I think now it's where we do get to those points where if it gets causing damage, time to talk.
So what we're saying is there's a lot of room for improvement for us in this, because this goes back to number 2, be intentional in your communication, because maybe if we openly communicated other things like that and talked on forgiveness, because really forgiveness is more like, hey, I had this issue, will you forgive me? Or I don't know. There's so much depth to this that we can really talk about. But if we were more open in our communication, in the forgiving, and like I'm really struggling with this with you right now, like we were going through this, how much more would we connect emotionally? I'm just saying, wow, there is room for improvement on that.
There we go. Well, and I thought we had a 10 out of 10.
Wow.
So
Wow.
Here we are.
Okay. So I'm hoping you're taking this in your marriage and you're going, wow, okay, we could really start talking, working on our communication and our forgiving and what that looks like. So that's what I'm saying. No one ever gets a 10. Because there's always room for improvement. Always room for improvement. Do I think we're doing really good at it? Yes.
Yes.
And
high five.
Have we gone like year 1 as opposed to year 15? Where are we at? Dang, I would have ranked us a 0 then, and definitely up here about a 7 now. So
there we go.
So
we are doing
good.
better. Every year
good.
getting closer.
So
and
so
closer
whenever when we're in year 30. We're going to be like solid 9.5.
9.5, that's what I was going to say. All right. So next, a marriage reflecting God. Show your spouse the same grace Christ has shown you. And I feel like this one goes really hand in hand with forgiving freely, but maybe not. Maybe you see it differently. But because that forgiveness means that there was a wrong and that they need some grace in that area. And so to me, it's very similar showing, but maybe do you hear it differently, or how do you interpret that?
No, I think so. And I think grace is empowering, right? Grace is that encouragement in each one of us, just knowing that, we have God's power to overcome anything in our lives, right? And I think that's kind of the same way in marriage, is just encouraging each other and giving grace and some of the things that we might be struggling with, but knowing that that's not where God's called you to be, that it's that encouragement of, hey, you're going to overcome this, and I'm locking arms with you, and we're overcoming this together because we are one. So, just grace to be able to overcome anything.
Maybe that's where I give us a 10 out of 10.
Oh, and that?
9.5.
9.5.
Out of 10. I mean, I do feel like, especially with your personality, to me, I feel like instead of us arguing, there's so many things that in my previous marriage, or I think a lot of marriages out there, are things that would cause a fight for most people. They would get upset with each other. They would start arguing with each other over some of the things that we do that annoy each other. And we just choose to give grace in that area and move on. Money situations, financial things that maybe we don't agree on or we think we agree on, and then someone goes behind the other and does something that, spends more than they should. Or
why'd you look guilty in that? You just looked guilty for a minute. That's weird. But yeah, go ahead, continue.
Riley, our oldest, she had an issue this week where she spent a little bit more than she thought. She didn't have as much money as she thought she had to get her car fixed because she'd hit a deer on one of her trips back and forth.
She hit a deer.
And she was really beating herself up.
I hit a wall, and this one's, I hit a deer.
I hit a deer. She said a deer hit me is what she kept saying. A deer ran into me.
Yeah.
And so she was beating herself up because she didn't have as much as she thought. And we were in a place where we were able to, help her in this little transition period. And I was like, don't beat yourself up. I spend more money than we have all the time. And she started laughing. I started laughing. And, you know, like...
Randall hears this later and starts crying.
But, you know, finances is a huge area.
She's like, remember, forgive freely.
You got to give me grace in this area. But it's a huge fight that a lot of married couples have and it looks different in all marriages, right? And how much money you have. And when I say I spend more than we have, what that looks like versus in your house when someone's spending more money than they should be spending, and the safeguards y'all put on your budget and stuff. Hopefully you're budgeting. And this is the type of stuff, though, that in my previous marriage, had I not had the relationship that I have with God now, and you not had the relationship that you have with God, that would be some knockout, drag-out fights.
Oh, yeah.
But I choose to give grace in those areas to you, and you so kindly give grace to me in those areas where we fall short in our marriage. I do feel like we extend that much more than we would have not having Jesus as our
no doubt.
number one.
No doubt. Yeah, no, and it is. And it's knowing that, you know, we're just human. We mess up. We make mistakes. We're not perfect. We're not good at some things. We're trying to get better. And when we're both looking to God for that and seeing his example and the grace he gives us in life as human beings, and, you know, it's that example that we carry with our spouse, that we're saying, you know, if God can love me through all my mess and loves my spouse just the same through all of their mess, then we should love each other the same way through all of our mess. Because if I look at that, I you know, we could nitpick and say, okay, well, I'm going to be angry at them because they're really sucking at this, and then I'm going to go let them have it. But it's whenever we sit there and say, yeah, they may not do well at that, but there's a lot of things I don't do well at either. You know, so if we want to start a mudslinging fight, you know, there's plenty of mud to be slung at each other. We're all going to come out a mess. So, you know, it's really taking it back, saying, okay, I understand that my spouse is not perfect. I'm not perfect, but I love her anyways. You know, just like Christ loves me. And it really softens your heart in matters and allows you to sit there and say, okay, well, they're not perfect there. Where am I not perfect at? You know, what could I work better on as well?
Yeah, and the softening the heart, if this is a thing that you struggle with your spouse, of giving that grace, then going to God, that is where, when it says putting God as your number one, is when you're frustrated or upset, going to God and saying, Lord, soften my heart. Help me see them the way you do. And Vanessa lays it out beautifully, where she was talking to a friend. It talks about in the book, she was talking to a friend, and basically it was like a counselor, and laying out all the things that she thought Scott was doing wrong in their marriage, and then says, well, how are you, like, praying for him or something like that? And she basically just kind of like makes her anger, her frustration more eloquent in a prayer kind of thing, of how what he needs to fix, until God really began to show her, like, he made Scott the way he is, and these qualities that he has is actually like a strength of his. So how can you focus on that and not on all of the negative things? And then she began to see herself. It's like, instead of looking at all his faults, okay, where have I been wrong? Because I've been trying to change him and make him how I want him to be. And so read the chapter.
But who has God made him to be? So it's kind of looking at now your spouse. God, show me who you've made them to be. And I loved how they had said that in there, because that is that, you know, we try to make everyone fit our model and our, you know, glass, you know, in our box, to where, you know, oh, it's got to be this. I want my spouse to do this. I want my spouse to do this, and they need to be doing this, and they're not matching up here. And the thing is, that's us, you know, that's our selfishness coming out of what I want. You know, I see the Willy Wonka, like, I want it now, you know, kind of that. But whenever we can step back and say, you know what, it's not about what I want. God, show me who you've made them to be. Who are they? Help me to better understand that, because honestly, God has created our spouse perfect in his eyes, right? And he's created them in a special, unique way. God, show me that. Show me what that is. And whenever we come to God that way, we fall more in love with our spouse at that time. We start seeing the good in who God's created them to be. And so that gives us the ability to have more grace in the things that, you know, we don't always match up for.
Yeah.
So boom. Last one.
So a marriage reflecting God loves with humility. So when you hear that, love with humility, what does that mean to you?
Love with humility. I think that's that's putting love above anything else. It's basically submitting to love instead of anger, instead of frustration, instead of, they all kind of go hand in hand a little bit. It's instead of, just making love the banner that you lead from, no matter what, that you're always trying to approach things with love and loving to a fault, in a sense.
Yeah, I kind of see it, the love you with humility. It is where, like before, we were talking about giving that grace for the other spouse and their faults, where it is really turning that mirror back on you and saying, where are my areas? Because even though early on, I would say if someone said, sin is pride is a sin, do you have pride issues? And I'd be like, heck no, I'm self-conscious or I'm insecure. Or I don't have pride issues. I don't think I'm good enough. But in reality, when I really began to dig into some of the things that bothered me, it was because I did think my way was better or was right. And so I think that's where, when you love with humility, it begins to see that we all have those areas. And so now I'm no longer giving that grace or forgiving you. I'm looking at myself and saying, okay, what are some areas that I need to work on, that I need to improve? And God, how can you help me? And even in that, extending that same grace and love to yourself, knowing we're not going to get it right. We're not going to be perfect, but understanding God created us this way. Okay, Lord, how can I become more like you? God did create us like this, but that doesn't mean, okay, God gave me this smart mouth, so I need to open it and say something every time I'm offended or frustrated. I need to just pop off because that's the personality that God has given me. No, he is always pruning us and making us more like him, but he did give you these special gifts and talents and personality. How can you prune it and be at your best and not let it be something that's causing harm? So I don't know, that's how I interpret it. Is that?
And what would you rate us?
Loving with humility. So I think we do pretty good. I would give us an 8, and that would be each of us, I think, and I think that's why we don't argue as much and we don't let it go too long, as far as holding on to things we're frustrated with, that we do take it back. Because you've always said it's the Tandy way. Randall's personality is his way is the right way. That's his.
My way or the highway.
Yeah, and it's not really the high. Well,
my way or the.
No, it's you just need to get on board with me. This is the right way. His way.
My way or no way.
Yeah, this is the smartest way. He's thought it out. He's trial and error.
There is actually a road in Tuscaloosa, Alabama called Randall's Way.
Randall's Way.
We saw that, and I took a picture of it. And so, yes. I sent it to all my family, and I said, yeah, you see?
It's my way.
There's a street.
But he jokes because his brother is the same way, his dad's the same way. It's a generational thing. But he has come to the point, even though that's his natural tendency, because he works hard in that area, he sees, okay, there's more than one way to get this thing done. And yeah, my way might be right, but hey, if they want to take the longer, harder route, let them.
Randall's good way.
Randall's
best way.
Yes.
No, and it is, and I think that, as we're wrapping up, I think that's one thing that will make your marriage probably some of the strongest right there is just in that, it's personality, generational things that we each have, and it's recognizing those. And if you can recognize those, then you can overcome those. And that's something that I've worked really hard at. I know you've worked really hard at and the thing is, we'll go to God first, and God's always got to be the first point that you go to and say, God, show me within myself what are areas I need to work on. Whenever you do that, you will find there's a lot of things within you that need work, and it's so easier to point blame and fingers at our spouse than point blame and fingers at ourselves. But when you take the time and you do the hard work within yourself, And it's a never-ending thing. You know, I mean, we're all, really, I think that's a lot of what life is, is just trying to get better, is trying to become better and more the way God has called us to be and who he knows we are. But whenever we take that time to self-reflect and continue working on ourselves and our faults, our bad habits, our things within ourselves, man, it spills over into our marriage. It spills over into our family, and you're more free whenever you do that. So no, I think we both done really well at that, trying to work on ourselves. It's just it's a good thing. It's a good thing, and that's part of that love with humility is understanding that we all fall short of the glory of God, and it's not by our might, it's by Jesus Christ. And whenever we rest in Jesus, then we are forgiven. God calls us righteous. He calls us co-heirs to the throne, and that's what we rest in. And then we extend that grace and that love to our spouse. We extend that grace, that love to ourselves. We extend that grace and that love to our stepkids. It's whenever we approach our family and we approach our marriage and our relationship with God that way, it's just powerful. That ignites our family, and so it's good. That brings a lot of healing and restoration.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that is a lot. What we just laid out for you here in A Marriage Reflecting God, a lot of it does coincide, but there's a lot like what we just went through, where you can look and see, here, this is where I'm at, and this is where I want to be, and begin to have those conversations and do it in that loving way. And like Randall said, when you're taking it to God first, all of this, taking it to God first, and he's going to begin to say, Lord, okay, here's these 6 things. Where do I rank in these? And I know we can get fixated on where is our spouse because we want them to improve. We hear messages like this and our brain goes to, oh, they need this, they need this, they need this. But really, I think that they did a good job of ending this on that humility and like, okay, Lord, show me. And then again, give yourself grace. Don't beat yourself up, but begin to work towards, Lord, what is it that I can focus on right now? Because you try to focus on everything, then you're going to get just super overwhelmed. But your marriage is a continually growth. And when you're doing this God's way and you have a marriage that's reflecting him, the good thing is you have time. You have time, because this, we've been married 15 years. We're hoping by year 30, it looks like this. By year 50, if we're still alive, it looks like this. We're growing towards that because this is our last marriage. But don't forget to go get the book if you haven't already. It's sold pretty much anywhere books are sold. Amazon is there. We'll have the link in the show notes. Get the book and follow along. Begin to read, because we can only pull out so much of the book and be able to talk about it today with you. And there's so many other practical things in this chapter as well about putting those safeguards up in your marriage. And then just that reminder that the conference is coming up September 30th. And so you can get tickets live, or they have made it now where you can get tickets virtually as well, so that you can, if you're not near Texas, and Texas is a huge place, so if you can't drive here, then you can watch it. Carve out that weekend with you and your spouse. Or if your spouse is unwilling, do it for yourself. And this conference is going to be empowering for your marriage. So take time to get signed up and either be there in person if you can, come by, stop by and see us.
Yeah, it's in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So if you're in that area, we're actually South Houston. So we're driving up there and we'll be at that conference. So yeah, if you hear this and come see us, we'll have a booth and everything. Come say hi, and we would love to meet you.
Yeah, they have incredible lineup, and then just even Randall and I being there and being able to just hug your neck, and Ginger and James will be there as well, which they've, Ginger's been doing the book club with me, and Heidi, the Marriage Emotion 365, her and Kenny, they're going to be there as well. And so you'll get an opportunity to see all of us in person as well.
And these are, ending now, these are good benchmarks, right? We always have to have goals in our marriage. And whenever you do something like this, go through these 6 things, rank yourselves right now, have that discussion with your spouse, get the book, y'all talk through this, rank yourselves where you are now, and then a year back, come do it again. And then 5 years, do it again. 10 years, do it again. And see the improvement you have when you become intentional with doing things like this. And you will see your marriage go from 0 to hero.
I knew you were going to say something
Did you
cheesy.
like that?
Or cheesy.
That one, I don't even know where that came from. I probably just stole
0
that.
to hero.
I
That
probably
is
just
on
stole that
something. I
from
was trying to
somewhere.
think,
Yeah. But man, that just sounds good, doesn't it? 0 to hero. So listen, guys, as we can always say, number one, first step, go to God. Go to God. Let him be the number one. Let him guide you through everything else. So we love you, and thank you for tuning in. Hopefully you are walking away just empowered and just full of just all kinds of wisdom and emotions and just joy knowing what the future holds for you, your marriage, your family, your kids. It's amazing. God bless you, and we will see you on the flip side.
Thanks for joining us today. We hope this episode has been a blessing and encouraged your family journey.
Make sure you stay connected with us and join our weekly Blended Family newsletter. We send an email out every Friday morning full of support and encouragement.
And when you join, we also want to give you a free gift. So go get yours today. The link is in the show notes below.
Have an amazing day. Remember to enjoy the journey with your blended family, and we'll see you on the next episode.